Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sree Iyer. Joining me today is Mohan Krishna Sonti, and we are going to be talking about Waqf. Is it WKF or WAQF? Is it WAKF or WAQF? And how this evolved over period and why the 2024 amendments make a lot of sense. So to know all this and more, let's welcome our guest Mohan Krishna Sonti. Mohan Garu, Namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel. How are you, sir?
Namaste, Shiji. Yeah, I'm doing good. Very happy to be back again. So my objective today is to provide a comprehensive information on the Waqf board, how it started, where it stands today, and what are the key factors that affected this and how we came about. Going back a little bit into the history and the origins of it. So we'll start with that.
All right. So let's start with the slide deck.
Yes.
Over to you. Go ahead, sir.
All right, so it's about the Waqf in-depth look. Basically, we'll go over the complete details on how it originated, where it started, why it started, and what is the purpose of it, and where we stand today in the 2024 bill, and what are the changes we're trying to make here. So the first references, I just want to make sure people understand all the data and information that I have acquired is very, very authentic. It came from a substantial portion of it came from the government of India. So we have the Central Waqf Council. You can see the website link is Government of India, Minority Affairs, Government of India. There's a PRS Legislative Research, Parliament Digital Library, the contents of which comes from Government of India, India Code Digital Repository of Laws. Also the contents from there come from Government of India as they claim it. So Office of the Ambassador of Waqf Portal, Government of Bangladesh. So all of them are very authentic. I have cross-checked it with several other sources and references to make sure all the data is authentic, and where possible, I just downloaded the acts myself and the bills so I could read it and see what is actually in it. So all the information is based on that. Let's go to the next slide.
Thank you, Mohan. Yeah, thank you, Mohan Garu. Viewers, you should look at this as a comprehensive guide of everything that you wanted to know. Like if you want to have one source that you can get all the data collated, researched, and properly presented, that would be this video. So you should look at it in that perspective. Somebody has a doubt, you can always say go refer to this link, or have this thing in your repository so you can immediately forward that link. So that's one favor that you could all do us. Plus, please like this video. Mohanji has worked hours on end to try and get this thing right. Very few slides, a lot of data. Here we go.
All right, for the timeline, there are a few specific dates and years that people have to remember to understand the history on why the Waqf came about. All right, so I'll just go over some of these key dates and what that actually means. Then you can always slide back in the video and you can see this particular slide. But these dates, you'll see the reference as you see the whole narrative of how the Waqf came about and what the changes are and how they were made. So first date is basically 1906 when the Muslim League was formed. We always associate that with Muhammad Ali Jinnah, his party, but Muslim League was formed in 1906. Then the other one is about 𝗤𝗏 Milli in 1910, written by Muhammad Iqbal. Now, the reason I mention that is Muhammad Iqbal is probably one of the most vocal and avid proponent of two-state theory about having a separate Pakistan. Even though the word Pakistan itself was mentioned later, but he wanted a separate country for the Muslims, and he was very vocal about it and very strong proponent of that. So what is 𝗤𝗏 Milli? Many people know about 𝗤𝗏 Hind. So 𝙒𝙏 𝙤𝙀 𝗢𝘂, which is like, is very famous. And, even in more recently as Manmohan Singh Ji, when he became the prime minister, he really praised this 𝙒𝙏 𝙤𝙀 𝗢𝘂, and it is made very, very popular in Bharat. But in reality, that was written in 1904 by Muhammad Iqbal. And just within few years, in 1910, he is a very strong separatist. He wrote 𝗤𝗏 Milli, where he actually writes, he says, Chino Arab Hamara, Hindustan Hamara, Muslim hai hum, Watan hai, Sara Jahan Hamara. So that was his actual sentiment and what he had written in 1910, just few years later. But for whatever reason, I think in Bharat, they keep repeating what he wrote in 1904. Then the Khilafat movement started in 1919 to about 1922. What is interesting is Khilafat movement, it has actually got nothing to do with Bharat at all. One of the chief supporter of Khilafat movement is Mohandas Gandhi. And why he supported that is, I'm not sure. He could have whatever reasons, but he's the only one who really supported among the tall leaders, along with other people, some people in Congress. Now, interesting part is even Muhammad Ali Jinnah never supported Khilafat movement, and his argument was that this is supporting the radical Islamists and it is not good for the country. This is Muhammad Ali Jinnah talking about radical Muslims, saying that it is not good for the country and it will harm the country. To which Mohandas Gandhi supported this. People often say Bal Gangadhar Tilak and few others supported. I don't think that is true at all, because this movement actually took off more like in 1990s, and Tilakji actually passed away in 1920. So the next item that we have to remember is the Nehru report. Yeah.
Before we go further, we must know that Rabindranath Tagore, Aurobindo, they all opposed it. And they saw through this thing very, very early. And they urged Gandhi not to do this thing. So there was a lot of opposition to this. Yet Gandhi somehow felt that by supporting this, that he could bring the Hindu and Muslims together. This appears to be the logic there, but it actually spectacularly blew up in the face of Gandhi and others. Now you're seeing the same thing play out in Bangladesh. Guys, this is the same thing. Over to you.
So actually in 19 to 2022, another interesting thing is most of the patriotic Hindus that we often look at the names, none of them supported this Khilafat movement. This has nothing to do with it. Like I said, even Jinnah did not want to support it. Now, also in 1919 to 22 was non-cooperation movement. So essentially what Gandhi did was he combined non-cooperation with Khilafat and brought it together as one package. So it appeared that many of the patriotic people are supporting both, but in reality, it wasn't. The Muslims are very clear on what they were supporting, and the patriotic people was very disgruntled about the support of Khilafat altogether. They were okay with the non-cooperation, but certainly not with Khilafat. Then the Nehru report of 1928. Remember that the Nehru report, under the guidance of Gandhi and others, this was written. At 1928, a lot of the Muslim League had a lot of internal conflicts and they're splitting into multiple groups. And at that time, this report is such that this seeks for a dominion status from the Britishers. Now, people talk about Purna Swaraj. That call was given like decades before that. But still in 1928 report, Nehru report says that they were seeking for a dominion status under the British rule. The Muslims weren't happy with it either for their own reasons. And this report is one of the key factors why all the Muslim League, the groups that were separating out slowly and having internal dissent, they unified by 1930. And in 1930, the Muhammad Iqbal, the Tarana Emily, he actually became the president of the Muslim League. And he openly proposed the two-nation theory, which later became the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. That separation happened in 1947. And Bharat Ganarajya, also known as Republic of India. All right, can we go to the next slide, please? All right, so what is the Wakf timeline? The origins of it, if you look at it, the first Musliman Wakf Validating Act came in 1913. If you look at it, the spelling here says WAKF, and in later days, it has changed to WAQF. Now, the spelling doesn't really matter, but I'm just saying this is the spelling that was used earlier, but nowadays in many places, they use WAQF. This is not an acronym, that is just an Arabic word. Basically, Waqf just means something like an endowment. So what is this act? It says an act to declare the rights of Muslims to make settlements of property by way of Waqf in favor of their families, children, and descendants. This came in 7th March of 1913. So what is the Waqf Validating Act? What is this Waqf Act do? Basically, we all know about the personal law board, right? So in this case, they have created a separate board, some set of laws, the Muslim Islamic laws, wherein all the property disputes and property things come under it. But at this stage, it is still kind of like a voluntary, right? The Muslims who want to abide by it can join that and they can become part of it. And then all the family, the property disputes or property issues, they are settled through the Waqf Act. It's almost like the personal law board is created for all the personal matters, the marriage and everything is under that. All the Muslims come under it, right? But in this case, it is kind of like a voluntary, right? People who want to be part of, following the Islamic laws can come under the Waqf, and then they decide on how the properties are divided, the families, children, descendants, how these go. Next one, please. Then came the Musliman Waqf Act of 1923. This is an act to make provision for the better management of Waqf property and for ensuring the keeping and publication of proper accounts in respect of such properties. It came in 5th August of 1923. This amendment is, this change is essentially adding more to it and saying how they can organize this kind of a property division, distribution, and whatever they do, all of their laws, so they can keep, the proper publications, proper accounts, so that this is helpful in maintaining a better order and structure to their system. The next one. Then came the Mussalman Waqf Validating Act of 1930. So this is an act to give retrospective effect of the Mussalman Waqf Validating Act of 1913. This came in 25th July 1930. Remember, Muhammad Iqbal, who was the first separatist and is a very vocal separatist of two-nation theory, he proposed in 1930s when he became the president of Muslim League, right? That is when he actually proposed it. Now, this is a case where they are saying not only do the lands, whoever is voluntarily adding, they can come back and say, all my properties, the way we divide, the way the descendants, the heirs will get the properties, go through the Muslim laws, the Waqf. In this case, they say this is retrospective effect going beyond 1913, meaning the Muslims or the Islamic, anyone that they have occupied the lands that they had from, say, Mughal times or whatever, all of them will come under this. So this is an expansion of that, saying that it is not after they come in 1913, even the past, you can say whatever was there from the past can also be brought into it. The next one. So those are the origins. And then in 1947, the country was partitioned into Islamic Republic of Pakistan, the East and West Pakistan. And then we have Bharat Ganarajya, also known as Republic of India. So in 1954, Wakf Act 1954, the Congress government under the Jawaharlal Nehru brought this statute. So what does it say? It says an act to provide for the better administration, supervision of Waqfs, be it enacted by Parliament in the 5th year of the Republic of India as follows, 21st May 1954. What is interesting is it extends to the whole India except the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So if you look at it, the ownership of land for the Muslims, they already own the whole of Pakistan, the East and West Pakistan, everything is taken. They have a complete sole ownership of that entire piece of land. All the Hindus and everyone extirpated, they came back to Bharat. And we also know what happened in Jammu and Kashmir, right? Basically, the entire Kashmir is completely flushed out of Hindus. All the minorities are gone. And the similar thing was happening in Jammu as well. So this ownership and application of these laws, this Waqf board, is apparently not extended to Jammu and Kashmir. Of course, it's not extended to Pakistan either, but so rest of the states, all the other states will have this. So they have their own laws and their own ways of managing properties. Next one. Then in 1959 came the Waqf Amendment, the first amendment to the 54 Act. It says the Public Works Extension of Limitation Act of 1959. So what it means is, basically, an act to extend the period of limitation in certain cases for suits to recover possession of immovable property forming part of the public works. So whatever they have claimed in the past, remember the retrospective effect, and they can go back in time. So whatever they have claimed, now if somebody wants to file a dispute, in certain cases, see, that is a key point, it's just in certain cases, it's not that everybody, an individual can go and do it, but in a few cases that they will pick it up, that they'll allow, they have the right to file a lawsuit to recover their possession, saying that this is actually mine and it does not belong to the Muslims or to the Waqf. All right. That date here is given as somewhere around 1968. You said you have time until 1968 to file the suit for the recovery of possession. After 68, you lose it for good. The next one. Now, what happens in 1964? There's another amendment where they created the Central Waqf Council by an amendment. Right? What is a Central Waqf Council? Central Waqf Council is a statutory body under the administrative control of the Ministry of Minority Affairs. It was set up in 1964 as per the provision given in the Wakf Act of 1954. So this was supposed to be an advisory body to the central government. But this is the case where in 1964 is when you have a central council that is pan-Bharat. Basically for everyone, you have one central council that becomes part of under the control of the Minority Affairs Ministry, and they become one of the advisory bodies to it. Interestingly, this is one of the last bills, pretty much one of the last bills that Nehru passed before he died. A few weeks later, he died, and this is one of the last ones. Then comes the Wakf Act Amendment of 1967. You remember the 1959, where there's an extension given till 1968. You have time till 1968 to file any lawsuit. After that, you lose for good. So in 1967, they made another amendment, the Extension of Limitation Act of 1959, where they gave extension till 69, right? From 68. Yeah. So they moved from 68 to 69. Then came the Wakf Act of 1969. Looks like they needed a little more time to do things. So there's another amendment that gave another extension till about December of 1970. That is when, after the 1970, there's no more changes. Basically, if you haven't filed the suit, then you lose the property for good. All right. Then came the Wakf Strengthening Wakf Act Amendment of 1984. This was strengthened, basically the board under the Congress rule of Indira Gandhi's Congress rule. This happened in 10th October 1984, where she has established the tribunals to handle the disputes related to Wakf. So until that point, people could actually go back to the courts and they can file their lawsuits until the 1970, if you remember, the last act. But now, after this, you have to go to the tribunal first. So tribunals are the arbiters and they decide whether your case is valid or not valid. All right. Interestingly, this again, just like in the case of Jawaharlal Nehru, this is one of the last bills and acts that was done by Indira Gandhi. A few weeks later, she died. All right. So these are the last things that they have done, both Jawaharlal Nehru and Indira Gandhi. Then the next one. Now, the Waqf laws. Now comes the Waqf establishing, right? So we had the origins, then they strengthened it. Once there's independent Bharat, they strengthened it through the Wakf Act. Now what they did in 1995 was basically, it's called Wakf Act of 1995. Here you say that the spelling has changed to WAQF. Whatever the reason, that is the spelling that was used, as I see it in one of the documents that I have. So there are places where they have written, but inside it, it says repealed WAKF, Wakf Act of 1954. So there are two different spellings, but this is not an acronym. This is basically an Arabic word, which means something like an endowment. They repealed the Wakf Act of 1954 and replaced it with a new one. This is where they have completely revamped it. They removed everything from until 1954, all the amendments, the tribunals that were added. Now they consolidated that and made it into something that is way more powerful than it ever was before. This came in 1995. It was a coalition era. It was still under the Congress government that did this. And of course, the communist parties and many others were part of the coalition. They did this. Now, what are the key elements of 1995 bill? So the formation of it, it says the Waqf boards should have with Muslim members in all the states. So this is one of the key elements, that every state must have a Waqf board and they will be comprised of all Muslim members in that board. Then the power, they have the power to acquire the property they believe belongs to Waqf. Initially, if you remember, when I said how it started, the Waqf's idea is simply that all the Muslims decide that I want to follow a different set of laws for my property. How I do the inheritance and all the distribution, divisions and all of that, the family maintenance, I want to follow the Islamic laws so people can volunteer and say, I want to be a part of the Waqf, right? So they can surrender to that. But now the Waqf can actually go and grab it. This is as good as this 1985 Act. Personally, I think this is more like a land grabbing act of 1995, because now they have the power to acquire the property. They believe this is theirs. The board itself can go and completely grab the piece of land, right? What happens in that? The next part is the burden of proof when they occupy that is with the landowner. It is for him to prove that it really belongs to him and it doesn't belong to the Waqf, right? And any arbitrary argument can be given that they owned it for at some point, there was a dargah, whatever, they can make any claims, and whatever historically, there's a history, the backward dates, right? Historically, they can go back and say that I owned it at some point. So they can actually grab it, and the burden of proof now lies with the landowner to prove that they always had it for a prolonged period of time. Now they established tribunals to resolve the disputes. So now you cannot go anywhere else but go to the tribunals to have the dispute. So the landowners have to go there. Now, the decision of the tribunal is final and cannot be challenged even in the Supreme Court, which means the tribunals, when they grab a piece of land, the landowners can only go to the tribunals. Remember, these Waqf boards is all Muslim members. The tribunals, they pick, many of them are Muslims, and pretty much their choice. And then they go there and the landowner can say whatever his claims, and the Waqf board can just reject it, and he cannot even take it even to the Supreme Court. So this is very powerful. This is basically, like I said, this is more like a land grabbing act, almost like a land mafia act, because they can simply grab whatever piece of the country they want, right? Now, I just want to say one more thing, just if we go back. So what happened in 1995 is basically when they have this kind of a law, they can actually grab an entire segment, like a village or a big segment of population. And the only way they can save themselves is perhaps if they declare themselves as Muslims, in which case they come under the Waqf and they can still live there. Otherwise, they have to vacate the whole place. So you see, this is like a land mafia in many ways. So let's go to the next one. And it
Before we do that,
Yeah.
we have a very similar case show up in Bihar, where the Waqf board claims the entire village belongs to them. And now
Yes.
the way the people can save themselves is by what you just said, convert to Islam. So let's take a
Otherwise, they
look at
have
it.
to
I have
vacate the
some.
whole place. They cannot even live there. But it gets interesting. Wakf Act Amendment 2013. This is what the Congress government under Manmohan Singh or Sonia Gandhi, what they did is they just made it far worse than that. I mean, we already saw in 1995, it has got it's very powerful, almost a land grabbing act, like a land mafia. But what they did here is they gave extraordinary powers. They gave unlimited powers to acquire the properties, meaning now they don't even need a proper justification. They can simply grab any piece of land and claim this is mine. And this cannot be challenged in any of the courts. You have to go to the tribunals. All the board members are Muslims. The tribunals are selected by them. All of them, majority, are pretty much all of them are Muslims, and they simply decide which way it goes. And if the person cannot fight that, most of the cases they will lose. And then basically they lose the entire piece of land and they cannot even go to the court. It gets even more interesting after that is it says the states are required to maintain, develop the properties to provide benefits, meaning these lands, not only did they grab it, it is the state's responsibility and the center's responsibility to make sure that these properties are still profitable. If they're deteriorating, if the properties are getting damaged for over a period of time, it is the state's responsibility to provide the funds and make sure and manage it and make it better. So it is almost like not only do they just grab the land, it becomes the state's responsibility to make sure that the person is pleased and make sure that lands are also doing very good, right? And the government's job. The last part is they can issue the directives to the central and state governments and can demand information pertaining to audits, surveys, revenue records, etc. In a way, it is saying that what started as the Muslims, I want to have my own little law. Can I have my own land division and property division laws? Whoever volunteers can actually join me. That was the Wakf Act. Some people joined. Now with the new law in 1995 and come to 2013, this amendment, what it is saying is they have the authority to go and demand things from the state government and central government and say, you better comply to the laws for the Wakf Act, which means if it says the provide benefits, if my property is getting deteriorated, it's getting damaged, then they can demand the state government to provide the revenue records, audit, surveys, and all of those things, and demand them that you come and fix it and make sure my property is still profitable. So even whether they lay down I don't think anyone can actually go and demand the state that the roads don't have potholes. We cannot demand that. The state government is their job. They'll try to do it. The central also, they'll lay the railway roads, the rails and roads and bridges and all of that. But here, this is a priority because they can demand that you come and fix all these things and make sure this is still profitable. That is the level in which this has gone in 2013. Basically, this is, I would say, it's very disheartening that somebody could pass. This is essentially, I don't think this is something that even the Mughals had this kind of a power over the country, in my opinion, because this is completely like a land mafia. Now, what are the changes that we are trying to make in 2014? So this is the Waqf Bill Amendment 2024. Now, I want the viewers to understand the difference between a bill and an act. When you say it's a bill, that is something that is tabled in the parliament, like Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Same like in the America too, if you put it in the Congress, basically that in the Senate, that is just a bill. And once everybody approves, signs it, goes to the president, everything is approved, that becomes an act. That act is basically the law of the land, right? So this is still a bill. So it's called the Waqf Bill Amendment 2024. And it basically proposes the following things. It amends the Waqf Act of 1995, renaming it as Act to United Waqf Management, Empowerment, Efficiency and Development Act of 1995. That is a change that the present government, BJP government, is trying to do in 2024. All right. What are the changes? It says, remember, they can go and grab the land, right? Now it says, and when they grab the land, they can say either you vacate or you can claim yourself to be a Muslim and come under the Waqf, the board, and then maybe you can live there, right? Now it says only the practicing Muslims for 5 years can declare Waqf, meaning they cannot just convert one fine day and whether it's coerced or whatever, and they cannot just say, okay, fine, I'll be at your feet and just take it. They can't do that anymore. They have to be practicing Muslims for at least 5 years before they can actually say, I'm going to be the voluntary person surrendering to the Waqf. Remember, the original idea of Waqf was volunteers who says, I want to follow those laws. That is how it is formed. The next is, whoever surrenders to that, they must own the property. What this means is basically all the land grabbing act, right? That requires the person who actually owns it to surrender, and he says that I own this property and I surrender to this Waqf. And it requires that the person who surrender also be a practicing Muslim for at least 5 years, right? So that will be the next stage. So this becomes very difficult to just grab a piece of land. The next is, it says the inheritance. That is what the Waqf actually deals with, right? It's their Islamic laws. The inherited, it should be inherited to the women as well. The heirs can be women as well, and they should be inherited to them. Typically, that is, it's very biased. In Islamic system, the women have little to almost no rights. So in this case, we are forcing that the inheritance be given to women as well. The next one, please. So the next one is, it says the government property will cease to be Waqf. What it means is, earlier with the 2013, technically, in theory, the Waqf can say that the entire Delhi belongs to me and nobody can stop it. In theory, they have to take it to the tribunal, and the tribunal can just simply say that, yeah, it looks like at some point Akbar was here, so this whole property is mine, or something like that. And basically they can grab the whole city. Now they can't do that. This says this property will seize any government property, whether it's the state or the central government. If the government says that this property belonged to me at some point, they can take it back. It doesn't belong to the Waqf anymore. So all the swaths of land that were occupied will be pulled out. Then Waqf board loses power to determine if it is a Waqf property. Now, earlier the Waqf board can simply go and claim that this piece of land is mine, right? And if it is government property, they can simply take over. Now this bill will reverse that and says anything that you took from government, you give it back. And the Waqf board also cannot just walk into somebody's land and say this land is mine. They lose the right to say this land is mine. It has to be proven that it belonged to the Waqf, it belonged to a Muslim at some point with an ownership who was a Muslim for at least 5 years, practicing Muslim and blah, blah, and all those rules, right? Now they lose the power to determine if this property, they cannot just claim a property. Then the collectors do the survey. Now, how will they decide if this property is mine? Earlier, they had a survey commissioners and additional commissioners. Several of them were basically Muslims. They can simply go and do a survey and say that looking at it, it appears to me that this property was actually mine, right? That's how the grabbing was done. Now it is done by the collectors. And who is the collector? The civil service officers. So basically the government civil servant, the topmost position in a state, right? One of the top civil servants. These collectors are the ones who are basically more neutral. You know, they are posted everywhere in the country. They come in and they have to do the survey right now, as opposed to the additional commissioners and survey commissioners doing it. Then Central Waqf Council must have at least 2 non-Muslim members. Up until now, all the Waqf boards will necessarily have all Muslim members. They pick all the counselors or whatever, they pick whoever they want, whoever is favorable. Even if there is by accident some non-Muslim, they are going to pick somebody who is more favorable to them, right? But in this case, all the survey commissioners, the additional commissioners, are pretty much majority were Muslims. Now what you're saying is the Waqf Council must have at least 2 non-Muslim members. all the MPs and eminent appointees, they need not be Muslim at all. So earlier, the appointees that they used to pick and choose, nationally they used to pick the Muslims. Now we are saying it will be appointed, and those appointees don't even have to be Muslims. Of the Muslim members, at least 2 must be women. It says at least 2 must be non-Muslims, at least 2 of the members must be women, and the MPs and other eminent appointees, they don't even have to be Muslim on who is going to oversee this. Let's go to the next slide. Then the state appoints the MLAs, MPs, MLCs, and bar council members. Earlier, the Waqf board, instead of the Waqf board appointing them, a Waqf board used to appoint they used to pick the MLAs, MPs, MLCs, the bar council. All of them were part of this Waqf board, right? They used to pick them, and they always used to pick some Muslim members. Now it is the state that will appoint these people to the board, who are MLAs, MPs, MLCs, the bar council. All these people will be appointed by the state. Now the power lies with the state to appoint them. Earlier, the Waqf board would go and pick whoever they want. Now it says the state is going to appoint them. And when they appoint them, they don't even have to be Muslims. They're going to appoint people who are going to be fair, who are going to do the right thing, right? That is going to be another big change. Another one is, it says the board must have at least 2 non-Muslim members. It must have at least 1 Shia, 1 Sunni, at least 1 backward caste Muslim, and at least 2 women. So earlier, it was all a group of one sect who used to dominate all of these things. It's saying even within Muslims, if you look at the Waqf board members, that too runs like a mafia within a mafia. Because one sect used to just dominate everybody else, and they will ignore others, and they used to suppress other people to other sects within the Muslims. So here the government says even one sect of Islam cannot randomly just come and dominate and suppress other Islamic sects. It says this requires at least 2 non-Muslim members, and should have at least 1 Shia, 1 Sunni, 1 backward caste Muslim, and at least 2 women. Now, in the states where you have the population of Bohras and Aga Khanis, 1 of each must also be in that. You must have at least 1 Bohra Muslim and 1 Aga Khani Muslim must also be in that, because they are one of the most marginalized. If you see, even within the Islamic sects, the discrimination is extremely rampant within the sects. Even in the world level, you see that none of the 2 Muslim countries can ever get along well, because they simply belong to different sects. Within Bharat too, in fact, out of the 60 sects that Muslims have, all of them coexist only in Bharat. All the other 60 Islamic countries, they don't get along well. They all are different sects. Here, even within Bharat, there are sects which actually suppress and try to dominate other sects. So they bring in this law that 1 Shia, 1 Sunni, 2 backward caste Muslims, 2 women, at least 2 non-Muslims. And where you have Bohra and Aga Khani, who are the most oppressed of them all. Of course, Ahmadiyyas are the most, but there are many other such sects who are completely oppressed to the lowest levels. They need to also be present in this. The tribunals of district judge, joint secretary level, they don't require person with knowledge of Muslim law. Earlier, they required, in the previous law, it says all the tribunals must have a person who is well experienced in the Muslim laws, so that he gives a judgment. If somebody goes to a tribunal and says, you occupied my land, he goes to the Muslim who talks about the Muslim law, and according to that law, as you know, that Muslim law looks at others as dhimmis or kafirs. Basically, if he determines that this is invalid, then it's invalid. So basically, you cannot win a case. But now we say that this person who is going to be in the tribunal is going to be a person, district judge or a joint secretary level person, an ex-judge or joint secretary, and he doesn't require to have any of the Muslim law, knowledge of Muslim laws. Next one. Now, this is the last part is the tribunal orders can be appealed in High Court. Remember earlier they had literally supreme powers, right? They cannot be appealed in Supreme Court. You only have to take it to tribunals where you have somebody who talks about only Muslim laws. And according to Muslim law, none of the other minorities have any value on what they say. You already know it doesn't, so it always, the judgment used to go in one direction. So it was almost futile to go and fight them. But now it says the tribunal orders can be appealed in the High Court. So it is basically bringing them back into the main fold, saying that even though it was originally formed as, can I have my own little laws that people who voluntarily join me can follow? It moved to becoming the Land Mafia Act, where they simply have the supreme powers and nobody can even question them. So this is basically cutting some of those supreme powers that they have. No other government body has that kind of powers. Not even the military has this kind of powers. Just so you know, even they cannot take a property. They cannot do any of these things. Even the Indian military. Now, central and state governments can audit the Waqf records. Earlier, if you remember, the Waqf board can actually demand the state and central government that you do certain things and you comply with it. And the state and central governments have to comply to it. Something like I said, even the military doesn't have those rights. But now we are saying the state and central government, now they are going to audit the Waqf records to make sure those records are in order. And these rules are followed by them. Then the last part is, they said if the Waqf board, where in the states you have the Bohra and Aga-Khani Muslims, they're saying if you have a Shia Waqf board and Sunni Waqf board, we should probably create a Bohra and Aga-Khani too, so that they are not the oppressed community within Muslims. So this is the complete idea of what the Waqf board is all about. So the origins, the rules, please look at the first slide, which tells you the history of what are the key years where major events have happened, and you see how this has evolved. All right. So that's about it. Dhanyavad.
Yeah, I'm just want to go back to that particular slide that you mentioned. This is where you tell, sorry, not this one, but the next one. This is what he's talking about, the timeline. This is the exact thing where things started happening on this. Viewers, please, share this thing amongst friends and family and relatives. Everybody needs to know this, because you never know whose property they are going to come and say, this is like Bhasmasur, this is my property, and then there's nothing you can do. I mean, people should line up and support this. It makes it much more equitable. It means much more equal for everybody. So this is what we should be doing. Instead of, partners like TDP and JDU now developing cold feet and saying, no, we don't want to do it. What nonsense. It could happen to you. Yeah. Be selfish for a change.
One thing I would suggest is, since this is now a bill, I request everyone to please download the 1995 Act, and for the 2024 amendment, what the government is doing, it is open for comments. So please make the suggestions and see where there are flaws. Like I said, that sounds more like a land grabbing act. It's a mafia act. This needs to be, really changed. And please provide your valuable comments. Read through the 1995 Act and please add to it the comments for the 2024.
Thank you so much, Mohan Garu, and you've put in a lot of effort to try and bring everything under one video. Viewers, that is the value you get from PGurus. And I hope by now you've subscribed to our channel. If you have not, please consider subscribing. Thanks once again, Mohan Garu. We'll be back again with Mohanji on a different topic very, very soon. Namaskar.
Namaste.